Welcome to today's podcast. My name is Pearlie Brewer, and I will be your host. The theme of today's podcast is seasonal affective disorder, depression, and the impact on the workforces within underground mines. Today's podcast guest is Adam Donnelly. Adam is the Area Regional Health and Safety Risk Superintendent for Canadian-based projects for Redpath Mining. Adam joins us today with over 15 years experience in heavy mining and metals. Adam is also the employer-based representative on the WorkSafe NB Board of Directors. Welcome, Adam. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too, Pearlie, and once again, thank you so much for having me on this venue.
Last month, we had Roy Siliker from the New Brunswick Construction Safety Association join us on our podcast to discuss an initiative that they have started in the construction industry dealing with the high rate of suicide in their industry. During our discussion with Roy, we talked about the life events that put stress on the construction workers, as well as what he referred to as the stressors of working in the construction industry. The mining industry really is very similar to the construction industry as far as job stressors go. So today we're going to talk to Adam about what he has seen over the years in the mining industry. So to start with, Adam, for someone not familiar with what it is really like working in the mining industry, let's start by getting you to tell us some of the stories about what it's like working in the industry, about the harsh conditions. For example, you just mentioned a moment ago that you just got back from Northern Ontario. So why don't you give folks a sense that may not be really familiar with mining of how harsh some of the conditions are that these guys work in, guys and ladies?
Sure. I mean, I'll keep it simplified, Pearlie. You know, in all honesty, I think it's very, very not familiar and almost it doesn't feel right when you're flying in the opposite direction of your family and your kin, right? So often these mines, you're flying in the opposite direction, and it can be, you know what? The whole travel route can be within 24 hours by the time you leave your house from the time you get there. I'd love to tell you that these mines are on a resort in, Jamaica or Montego Bay, but that's just not the case. Some of these mines, for the most part, they're very, very isolated. A lot of the times, the airports that take you there, they're chartered by the client or the company-owned charters, where essentially you're landing on the mine site onto a gravel road. It's a man-made airport. You know, it doesn't have the de-icing facilities and even the lights like we have, the sonars and so on and so forth, like normal airports do, right? And I guess what Roy says in terms of some of the stressors, or when you're far away from home like that, these mine sites, you're experiencing inclement weather. You're at the mercy of our Lord Savior and the weather gods up at the top. Quite frankly, it's you're at the mercy of the weather, whether you land or get out of the mine site on time. So it is hard for rotational workers to actually, plan 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, so on and so forth. You know what? It's definitely challenging to say the least, for miners when they're getting into those isolated communities where the nearest community might be 500 or 600 kilometers away. But the mine site itself, you can't just drive off of it. You have to be able to land and charter off on that company owned aircraft.
Now let's talk for a second about weather. Today it's -7, wind chill -14. What kinds of weather conditions have you seen at some of the mines that you worked at?
Yeah. I mean, so listen, whether it's in Saskatchewan or whether it's in northern, a good example, the Musselwhite mine, or Saskatchewan at Jansen, even Manitoba, it's not foolish to say the winds are -70 to -75 kilometer winds. It's not foolish to say that it's -40 with -70 kilometer winds. This is, I hate to say the word normalcy, but this is very, very normal when you're in northern parts of Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and even Ontario. So of course, when visibility is poor, when you look out and, you're looking out your window and all you see is, for lack of a better word, snow drifts. and you can't see a hand in front of you, and there's not a piece of skin on your body that you have exposed, because we know you won't make it to the next building, frostbite will set in. It's a challenge, right? And that's another stressor, because everybody loves to work, but we all want to be home too with our families, right? After that 14-hour days, because it's 12-hour days, we'll get into that later. But for all intents and purposes, a miner is up and about for 14 to 14 and a half hours every day. So, very, very harsh conditions. Very cold conditions. I'd love to tell everybody that the gold mines are in New York City, right in the middle, but it's true. That's just not where the ore bodies are always, so subtly located, so to speak.
Now, I can go to work in the morning. I'm about 10 minutes from my job site. I can work until 5, 10-minute drive, and I'm home. I have the evening with my family. I can do all the nice fun things I want to do with my kids, plus my own personal recreation. Not the case in miners. So what's the actual schedule like for underground miners that say are working a 2-week on, 2-week off?
Yeah. So, I mean, when we say the term 2 and 2, I want our public to know that 14 and 14 sounds good, but I want everybody to know it's actually a 16 on, 12 off. And the reason I say that, you're away, so you're 14 days at work working, Pearly. However, your days, you fly to work on your days, technically your days off. So a good example. Let's say I would be leaving today for my 14-day rotation. Today is my day 14. See, I don't get my day 14 to myself. I'm in actuality flying back to work on my day 14. My day 1 off is actually leaving the mine site, and I'm on my way home. So when you look at it, you have 12 full days home, pending all good weather-related flights, and you just worked for 14 days. So it's really a 16 and 12. Because, I mean, even though you're on your day off, you're not yet with your family. You're on your day off traveling towards your family in the hopes to get to getting there and seeing them on time, right? A full day, Pearly, I'm going to keep it simple for you. It's a 12-hour shift. We have a toolbox. So let's say 6 to 6 for all intents and purposes, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. The miners are up at 4:30. They're in the lunch hall, or also known as the mess hall or the cafeteria. They're packing their daily supplies. They're having themselves their nice breakfast, trying to wake them, they've had a shower. They wake themselves up. They get into a nice routine, our male and female miners, right? They're into that routine. Their alarm clock it's almost like Groundhog Day. Their alarms are set at 4:15. They walk down the hall. They brush their teeth. They get to the mess hall. They pack their lunch. They sit down. They eat their breakfast. And then all of a sudden, it's 5:45 a.m. and they're all dressed in full PPE, awaiting the morning toolbox safety huddle that starts at 6 a.m. That's why I tell people they are working 12 hours, but it's really a 14.5-hour day for the typical miner, depending on the mine site. Some mine sites have different fatigue management policies. I mean, I'm not saying every mine site runs a 12-hour day. I'm sure Macassa for Agnico Eagle, from what I've been told, I think it's more of a 10-hour day. But for all typically intents and purposes, mines run 24 hours at a 12-hour paid day work, which can be pretty taxing. A 14.5-hour day for all our employees.
So when they finish at the end of the day, what's the rest of their day look like?
Yeah. So the rest of their day, they go right away. They go to the cafeteria. They've had a hell of an appetite, right? They've showered already over at the mine site, and now they're walking and they're getting over to their cafeteria. They're eating the daily lunch, and luckily the lines that work the mines that we currently work on, it is good food. I mean, we're on a Newmont site right now, Newmont Musselwhite Mine. Fantastic food, fantastic chefs. And you know what? They're not going hungry by any means. But when they're done eating, I just want to throw this out there. It's already 7 o'clock at night. Do they go to the gym? They might find 30 minutes to try to do some exercise, but they also have to call their loved ones. The time change is different. Their children need to speak to them. Their wives need to speak to them because all day they could not get a hold of them unless it was an emergency where they call, they can't, there's no phones underground, right? There's no, unless you're a supervisor. So the point of my story here is, they're already exhausted. They eat their lunch. They might go to the gym. They finally get back to their little room and they have to give some family quality time. Stressors, as Roy might have called it. I mean, one of the stressors could be, geez, the internet's very poor. We have 600 people on the same bandwidth right now, and everybody's calling their wives and their loved ones at the same time. FaceTime might not be possible because of the bandwidth. Now they're calling their wives. It's a little bit in and out. Let's call it what it is. She can hear me, but I can't hear her. It becomes a little bit taxing at the end of the day. In terms of that family balance and trying to keep connected to what your family has done on that given day.
And it certainly has to be stressful from the point of view that when you're talking to your husband or wife and there are issues back home, you're very much limited into what you can do if you're on a site a few hundred miles away.
Yeah, listen, that is a challenge. I'd like to tell you it's only one plane ride, but a good example, the Newmont Musselwhite site is, it's more than one plane ride. It's Moncton, Toronto to Thunder Bay chartered into the site. And as anybody knows right now, it's, quite frankly, Air Canada. I mean, they're experiencing their own challenges. I don't want to be totally negative on airlines, but they've had since COVID. I'm not sure it's gotten much better in terms of delays. Maybe they have a manpower issue or personnel issue as well, but you feel helpless. You're right. You're in your room. You're on day 6. Your lovely son just got COVID or he has strep throat. Well, what do? You triage the incident as a family. And you make a decision with a husband and wife. Yes, I need to come home for this one. He has pneumonia, and I need to be there for him. Or you know what? It's just the basic flu. But at the end of the day, you still, as a human being, you probably feel very helpless. And your wife, you're just happy that you have a strong marriage and that your wife is used to taking care of these types of events, and maybe you have a great support system with family at your home as well.
Now, I'm sitting here right now again, I'm looking out the window. It's a nice sunny day, a few clouds. It's a little cool, but certainly nothing compared to a mine, but it's always nice to see the sun. In the case of the mining industry, not the case. Tell us about the effect that has to have on guys and ladies over a period of time.
Yeah, well, I mean, great. It's a great point that you're bringing up. For me, I'm going to try to intertwine this with seasonal affective disorder. I mean, first and foremost, miners, seasonal affective disorder, it is a type of depression, and it happens during certain seasons of the year. Most often it's the fall and the winter. It's thought that the shorter days and the less daylight may trigger a chemical change in the brain, leading to symptoms of depression. Depression is different from feeling sad or unhappy. It's not a sign of personal weakness or a condition that can be willed or wished away. And to be quite honest with you, women are more affected than men with depression in terms of them actually reporting it. I think there's a stigma around depression and seasonal affective disorder. The stigma being that we are supposed to be strong, tough miners. We take care of our family, and we're the breadwinners in this family. But we don't talk about some of the mental components that it's happening within our own heads. We don't speak out loud, right? And there is a couple of things over the years from our subject matter experts and our mental health advocates. They say that people that are at risk of seasonal affective disorder. And what causes it? They're saying that less sunlight and shorter days are thought to be linked to a chemical change in the brain that may be part of the reason for seasonal affective disorder. That screams out a minor to me. A minor gets up at 4:45 in the morning, even when he walks outside to go over to over to his change house, it's already pitch dark. He works a 12-hour shift in the ground. He or she comes up out of the ground. Guess what? It's dark again. They go back over to the cafeteria or the mess hall again, eat, and guess what? They go to bed. So what they're seeing is a 15-day cycle of pure dark, right? Melatonin, it's a sleep-related hormone. It's also been linked to seasonal affective disorder. The body naturally makes more melatonin when it's dark. So when the days are shorter and darker, more melatonin is ultimately created as a body's response. Melatonin is also something I know that some medical professionals may provide little pieces to your children to help them sleep. It's also a form of sedative or it helps that individual sleep better. But seasonal affective disorder, but the question is, what are we doing about it in mines? How is it affecting the working industry? And this is a simple answer for you. How it's affecting is, first and foremost, we don't have extra we depend on our lovely miners that are on site. When someone's having a mental health flare-up or some form of seasonal affective battle, well, we want them, if they're not, because the quote-unquote, are you ready, willing, and fit for duty? We got to move that based off of not just drugs and alcohol, Pearly. We're talking about the mental health component to that. When we ask those questions in our toolbox safety meetings, is everybody fit for duty? Are we ready, willing, and able to safely perform our jobs? There is a mental health component to that, and it's not just drugs and alcohol. So I think that some of the symptoms with seasonal affective disorder, you have a loss of interest and pleasure in activities. You're almost socially withdrawing yourself with an increased sensitivity or irritability, so to speak. Little bit of anxiety. You have a feeling of guilt and hopelessness. Maybe you're not exactly yourself. Some people would say the term, geez, you're not yourself. Well, maybe for someone that's extroverted, it's the opposite. They're being introverted. Another thing with seasonal affective disorder and depression, you know what? Oversleeping. A lot of people are sleeping and they're drowsy in the daytime, which isn't typical for their character, so to speak, right? It's becoming an issue and a challenge in terms of deliverables and manpower requirements when we need our people. If we have a team of 12 people and we're noticing as the shift goes on, there's always one individual and he calls in sick, he or she, they don't have to say I'm having mental health issues, but at the end of the day, if we practice active, genuine care, some of these employees are brave enough. They're courageous leaders, and they often call me and they say, this is what I'm dealing with right now. I'm dealing with, could be a form of depression, right? Inconfidence, Pearly, by the way. And that's where we're seeing it affecting the minds, because it's not as easy as saying, no problem. Hey, Pearly, you're on the overtime list. Do you mind? We're going to fly you in here. It's going to take you about 14 hours. We do have a gentleman might be in his room. We have the complement that we have on site that we flew in. And we have to make sure we're practicing active, genuine care and making sure that employee's mindset is right to go to work. But by all means, that we don't want that employee underground could be a harm or a detriment to himself and others. So they're doing the right thing by being in their room. But I think there's a few things too that we as an industry can do better on to prevent seasonal affective disorder. And I'll touch on that too after your next question. Now,
you're doing your talk in the morning. What sort of indicators would you look for, or what signs that might indicate to you that if a person's not forthcoming, that they're having an issue? What kind of things would you look for to maybe help you identify someone that you may want to just have a word with or talk to see how they're doing?
Well, sure. That's a great question. And that's about knowing your crew. If there's an individual that's always very vocal in safety meetings and they love to participate. If you notice their head is down and if you notice that they're fatigued and they have a low energy level, that might be a sign. It could be a sign also that there's just basic family problems, like you mentioned. I'm definitely not a doctor by any means, but you know your crew. If you take a specialty to actually say, I know this person inside and outside of work, you'll notice that. If they have a decreased ability to focus and concentrate during the safety toolbox meeting, that could be a trigger as well. Trouble thinking clearly, it could even be little things like constantly having headaches or physical problems. You could start to notice that the individual maybe just, I don't want to use the word doesn't care, but just in the moment, the toolbox talk isn't that important to he or she in that moment as per the past, right? It's almost just going through the motions. So yeah, those would be little triggers right in the morning, talking about is everyone fit for duty? And at the end of the day, a good supervisor and a good manager, they'll always try to pull that person aside in confidence on a one-on-one basis, not within the form of the meeting, just to have a talk with them to see if everything's okay, right? Because not everybody wants to speak, in public about some of their problems. I think the stigma around men and mental health right now is, for me, it's okay to not be okay, Pearly. I think that's a huge, a huge line and a huge step forward. And to quote the great Robin Williams, and everybody remembers Robin Williams, he made everybody laugh his entire life, but he suffered severely with depression, not seasonal affective disorder. But he said people don't fake depression. They fake being okay. And I think that's a huge testament to understanding of being depressed. Nobody's faking being depressed. It just happens. It comes to them naturally. They don't know why, and they're fighting a battle that we ourselves might not know about.
So right now I'm here in Fredericton. If one of my employees has any sort of issue, depression, seasonal affective disorder, whatever, a lot of resources available. Now, in your case, as you mentioned, unfortunately, who goes into a mine is what you have available. So how do you deal if you identify individuals that maybe need to talk to someone or need some help? How do you identify or how do you provide that help?
Yeah, another great question. So first and foremost, I can't speak more highly of Redpath Canada Limited and the human resource team and the management team that we have. Redpath Canada Limited, we have what's called it's CompPsych. It's an employee assistance program governed by CompPsych, or Guidance Resources Now. And what we have and what we advocate for, it's a free confidential program, Pearly, that we have an app on our phone, and the app that you go into, you can essentially pick whichever maybe you're looking for legal advice. Maybe you're looking for counseling advice. Maybe you're looking for addiction services. But you download the app, and Redpath provides the web ID and the anonymous password to everybody. We have a stack of cards in our superintendent and management's office, and also we have a stack of cards in a central neutral area, which is it's on our Joint Health and Safety Committee board. And you'd be surprised. What I love about it is that people do come up to me and say, hey, Adam, can I have a few of those cards? Because it's not only about seasonal affective disorder, it's such a huge plethora of help regarding marriage counseling, regarding, even your benefits, even your financial advisors. It's an employee assistance program, addiction services, being counseling, so on and so forth. They confidentially get you in line, and it all starts from the user-friendly app. They get you targeted with the right counselor or the right advocate. And I know for a fact people are using it, quite frankly. It's an amazing program that Redpath has, and I think the key to it is that it is confidential. I don't know that Pearly Brewer is using it, and I rest assured the Human Resource Department doesn't know, let's say, that Adam Donnelly is using it as well. It's highly confidential, and by the way, and it's free. It's part of our benefits package. The other resource that Redpath does well is through the Mental Health Commissions of Canada. They provide a lot of, they provide several of our senior superintendents with the Mental Health Commission of Canada First Aid Instructor course. So we are certified in RedPath. There's certain amounts of people that provide the mental health first aid. And also, never mind the fact that some of our subject matter experts and superintendents provide mental health first aid, we often place people in the course. We offer them if they would like to take a mental health first aid course with the Mental Health Commission of Canada, right? Because I think the stigmatization of people living with mental health and addiction problems, it's all too common in Canada, including the environment that they're working in. And people are quite frankly, they're with their experience, they're living with experience of mental health and addiction, and often report and feeling devalued and dismissed and dehumanized by many of the healthcare professionals with whom they've come in contact with. So, of course, the Mental Health Commission of Canada, it's actually adopted the understanding of the stigma and making sure that we understand as tough male minors and providers that, you know, we also have this, that, how do you say, it's okay to be depressed. I think it's a part of life, especially since COVID, where we might not be ourselves lately. And I think part of the key is actually talking about it and breaking that stigma. And I'm sure that Roy Siliker, he was probably referring to a lot of the stressors, so to speak, because they're the same stressors that we're experiencing. The tough, you know, bravado minor, and same with the tough civil construction individual, right?
Now, do you have any idea what percentage of staff would actually be using your phone app?
Well, the truth is, I personally don't know, but I would presume my human resource department, the human resource department might have an idea. I just don't believe they'd have any names. Okay. It's a name. It's a kind of no names, no blame scenario. That I know one thing. I know people are using it because when the stack of cards on my desk go from 100 down to 20, and I have to reach out to HR for more cards, it's telling me people are using them in confidence, right? And and of course, I know people that use them. They tell me they're very open, right? And people like to talk to me. I'm down to earth, and they tell me sometimes what they're calling about, right? And I thank them for that. And I try to guide them in the best direction that I can based off my experience with my EAP program.
Great program. Do any of the mines have anyone on or someone on staff that folks can talk to, a counselor or whatever it might be? Or do they all pretty much operate on the same principle that you guys would?
Well, I mean, listen, I can't speak for all the mines, Pearly, but I've been in this game for 16 years, and I haven't seen an on-site, I mean, outside of the nurse practitioners, of course, but you're referring to a mental health advocate right now, specifically a psychiatrist. Outside of the nurse practitioners, the physician assistants, I haven't seen in my 16 years someone on that remote mine site that would be a counselor. Now, when I do see it, I hate to say it, it's reactive in the sense of it's counseling services due to a death. Someone that dies on a mine site, let's call it what it is. People that have seen that and witnessed that, it puts them in a terrible state of duress. And the great mine sites and the mine owners then fly in a counselor that is specific for trauma and distress and duress. But no, if you're asking me right now, the ones that I work on, there wouldn't be a counselor allocated for mental health first aid always there. But the mine companies as well have a very robust EAP program, just like RedPath. The program is readily available, and the cards, and it's posted all over the mine site, and there's a strong focus every so months on mental health.
So for folks that do suffer from seasonal affective disorder, what is recommended to help them through that time? Yeah,
so the first one being, and I've been on one mine site, it's light therapy. There's a certain type of light that you can purchase And if the sunlight isn't possible, which it much isn't, the exposure to this special light for a specific amount of time each day may help. I was at a mine site in Saskatchewan where they would place this type of photo lights, this light on the desk. And it's not a tanning bed. I don't want anybody thinking we're jumping in a tanning bed, but it's a certain type of light, that releases vitamin D as well. And, essentially they had it in all of the rooms, of our occupancy, right? Of our camp occupancy. And at that time, that camp had a 3,000 person camp where every camp did have a light therapy. The other thing is, I remember a very smart doctor that told me a few weeks ago, and he's probably one of the, just a joy to listen to. He said, Adam, if a doctor could prescribe exercise in one pill, it would be the most highly prescribed medicine in the entire world, and it would fix everything. But sadly, we can't. But exercising does relieve serotonin levels, right? It does make you happy and make you feel good, which is why all of these amazing isolated mine sites, they do have a pretty robust gym facility. Whether it's Newmont or Vale or BHP Billiton or Agnico Eagle, they do have a very, very plentiful amount of gym equipment for us to use. And a lot of the times, to be honest, it's a 24-hour gym, right? Because everybody has a different schedule. Of course, I don't want to get into in terms of I know doctors and professionals, medical professionals may prescribe some form of RX medication or an antidepressant, but I mean, it's not my job to diagnose by any means. So, I think there's definitely lots we can do. Even our eating habits, Pearly, change how we think and how we behave. There's a beautiful lineup. There's cheeseburgers, pizza, blah, blah, blah. But it's all important to know that there's also a healthy section at every mine. There's a healthy section that they do, and they do that on purpose, right? It's as per design. Yeah. And the sunlight, of course, it is important. Exposure to actual real sunlight, whether it's outside or near a window, it can help relieve those symptoms of seasonal affective disorder, but not everybody has the privilege of having a window when you're 3,000 meters below the Earth's surface.
So given your mining experience, what should every mine really have in place to help with mental health issues? What are some key points or key items?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I believe every mine site, first and foremost, we have to have a safety focus on seasonal affective disorder. When the fall and winter months come, I believe all of us as a mine site should say, this is our safety focus for the month. And let's talk about it. Let's talk about the triggers. Let's talk about the signs and symptoms. Let's talk about who is at risk. Let's talk about what causes seasonal affective disorder. Hey, you know what? Let's give our people info share and value on what is going on. And maybe that's going to trigger what they've been experiencing in their heads. After we do that trigger, we have to say, these are some of the resources we have available for you lovely folks. And that's when we when we review our robust EAP programs, when we talk about, when we maybe light therapy, talk about the gym, talk about who, providing our people the actual resources to understand how they can, what the symptoms are, but also how to treat these symptoms. And because a lot of the times the information that we don't tell them, well, how do you expect them to know? It could be a lack of communication, or quite frankly, it could be ineffective communication, right? So, I think that's part of what it is. It's all about being very transparent, being unbiased, and breaking the stigma, and having someone like myself or yourself, Pearly, or a manager, because seasonal affective disorder, it's affecting a lot more men because we're not talking about it. Our brave and courageous women, they are talking about it, and they don't mind speaking about who they're going to see or what helped them. But a lot of the times the males are being very introverted and, they're hesitant to make that, to even use their EAP program sometimes. So.
One final question. Bell Let's Talk has a program on every year where they encourage people to talk. You've talked about it's okay not to be okay. One of the ads I saw on TV here a couple of weeks ago, they interviewed a number of people on the street, and they asked them the question is, well, what would you say to someone that you know is struggling? And probably 3/4 of them answered, I don't know what I'd say. I think now that we have better recognition, or we're starting to have better recognition, that it's okay to talk. It's okay to explain that you're not okay. Do you think it's time now to maybe talk to people from the point of view of trying to teach them how to respond to people that want help or need help? That there's an approach to take that you can take and be seen as trying to be helpful, not trying to be intrusive. But if you sense someone is struggling, what can you do to help them? I guess is what I'm getting at.
Yeah. I mean, it's always a challenge, right? You don't want it, you're trying to do it politely. And of course, I'll give you a quick value share the other day. And I am not bragging by any means, but this event happened in Bathurst 5 days ago with myself and my lovely wife. So there's somebody sleeping in the bank, of course. Clearly they're having some struggles. They're sleeping in the bank where the ATM is, Pearly, at one of our local banks. Somebody did get scared and they called the police. When I got in there, the police were trying to, remove that gentleman. And I asked the police officer, I said, do you mind if I just have a talk with this gentleman? And I'm not, because I know where they're taking him. They're going to take him to jail. And he was just, quite frankly, he just wanted shelter. But yes, he was homeless. And, I know of a few areas in Bathurst, such as the Bathurst Youth Center and another few areas that I could take him to. After having a conversation with him, I didn't know him at all, but I did ask him, is there anything that you're struggling with right now? He said, quite frankly, I'm just hungry and I'm exhausted. I do have addictions, but I'm not on anything right now. A lot of people, might not trust this, but I did take him to a local of course, it had to be a McDonald's, but I took him to a local drive-thru. I got him all the food that I could get him. He did Pearly ask me for money, and I would be lying to you to tell you that, yes, I gave him money. I knew that the best thing for him was shelter and was food. I can't trust where the money, I don't want to feed his addiction. So I provided a lot of food and I provided shelter, and I did take him over to an area in Bathurst that I knew was going to shelter him for a few days, which I just felt. And by the way, the police are only doing their jobs too. The police are responding to a call. It's not the police, the good people of Bathurst. But I asked him, is there anybody that you'd like to talk to? And he said, I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind speaking to somebody about some of my issues. And I got him into that right direction. But the problem is not everybody. I think it's a challenge. It's a social governance issue. It's a social issue. We see somebody on the ground, somebody there, they're homeless, they're having struggles, and we're hesitant for our own safety. You might be protecting your own kin, your child is with you, and, they're going to ask the simple questions. Mommy, why is that person laying on the side of the street? Sometimes the answer isn't 6 words, Pearly. That person may have had a home before. That person may have had a great career, but quite frankly, they may have gotten a divorce, lost the job, and ended up in a very substantial depression, and here they are laying on the street. Depression doesn't happen overnight. It's a social, and depression isn't discriminative to a culture or a place or a religion or a person. It doesn't discriminate. It's always going to be there, and it can be passed down hereditary. But back to your question, what can we do in those moments? The best thing for you to do is want to see if the person is accepting the help. Not everybody wants it. If you ask that person, is there anything that I could do for you that would better help your situation? Pearly, quite frankly, they might say, you know what, yes, do you mind providing me a meal? They might tell you something that we can't say on this podcast as well, right? Depending on their state of mind and maybe or maybe not if they're on an influence. But I always try to give the option. I do try to do, as I get older, I say to myself, treat people the way maybe I wanted to be treated. And if you have a gift and you do have enough, sensibility to help somebody, there's no greater cause than that. And at the end of my day, I felt I just felt pretty good at what I did. I felt like a really good person, and I was hoping that guy would have shelter and some more food for a few days. And he thanked me too. He said, thank you for helping me. Because he didn't want to go to jail. He doesn't want to go sit into a cell either. The poor gentleman was struggling with mental health, a 27-year-old man who, what I got out of it, his mother remarried, and it sounded like, he didn't get along with the, it sounded like he didn't get along with the new man in his mother's life, and he chose to live on the streets with an addiction. And that's, I'm not above that either. And I just thank the Lord that I had the opportunity to help him. So.
Well, look, thank you very much, Adam, for joining us today. You reached out to us and asked to be on the podcast and asked to speak on this topic. It's so critical a topic. Mental health issues, whether it's for a male or female, doesn't really matter. It's across the board. We need to be doing more about it, and I think you've given us a good glimpse today about the mining industry, what you're doing in your industry, and all the different ways you can help people. Thank you very much for being on our podcast today.
Thank you, Pearlie, for having me once again, and thank you for Safety Services New Brunswick for always welcoming me with open arms.
So if you have comments or you'd like to provide feedback to us, we'd love to hear from you. If you have topics you'd like for us to talk about, we'd love to hear from you. You can always reach us at podcast@ssnb.ca. Stay safe. See you next week. And again, if you're feeling that you need someone to talk to, reach out. There's a lot of resources, and there's a lot of people that would love to hear from you and to help you out in whatever way they can. Thank you very much. See you next week.